I arrived on Thanksgiving and found my grandson freezing outside. The storm started before the first mile marker, thick white falling like someone had shaken a pillow over the whole highway. The radio kept interrupting classic rock with weather advisories. Dangerous wind chill. Avoid unnecessary travel. While Martha's old scarf rode shotgun, knotted around 2 gift bags I'd packed like talismans. One held a genuine leather glove I couldn't really afford. The other, a stack of superhero comics I knew an 18-year-old might pretend he'd outgrown. I bought them anyway. When I pictured Amos, I still saw the kid who believed capes could change the world. Family is all we have left, Martha would say, back when she was alive to make everything sound simple. 6 months without her, and nothing had felt simple. Thanksgiving was supposed to fix some part of that eat together. Laugh a little, remember what mattered, pretend the world was still gentle. I checked the dash clock. 2:30 p.m. If the roads didn't get worse, I'd reach Leona's by 3:15. I texted in the morning and called at noon. No answer either time. Maybe they were basting the turkey. Maybe my daughter's phone was silenced. Maybe everything was fine. The steering wheel was cold even through my gloves. A semi drifted across the lane and I let him have it, dropping to 40 with the old Chevy humming like a patient mule. Led Zeppelin thudded through the static. I kept imagining Amos in the kitchen, stealing crispy skin when his mom turned her back. Wilbur grumbling about football scores, some perfectly average holiday noise. The gas station off exit 19 looked like a lighthouse in snow. I grabbed coffee, peppermints, the kind Martha used to keep in her purse for fussy kids and men with too much on their minds, and listened to a clerk warn about spinouts on the interstate. You heading far? He asked. Just across the river. Family dinner. He nodded like he knew what that meant. Stubborn love against bad weather. Back on the road, I found myself talking to Martha, the way you do when nobody's there to say you're crazy. I'm going, I told the empty seat. I'm showing up. Like you wanted? The truth. I didn't say out loud, rode in the cab with me anyway. The bruise I'd seen on Amos's arm last summer. 5 pale ovals that looked too much like fingers. The way he'd shut down when I asked. The way Leona had chuckled on the phone. Dad, he's dramatic. Wilbur's just big on rules. Teenagers need structure. I'd wanted to believe her. Wanting is a kind of blindness. Snow softened the world into a watercolor by the time Maple Grove subdivision appeared. All the tidy lawns and wreaths and inflatable turkeys wobbling like drunk uncles. Christmas lights had started to creep into the neighborhood. Cautious strings peeking around eaves, testing the air. Leona's blue 2-story sat at the end of the block, with white shutters and a porch swing. We'd hung one humid July when Wilbur still bothered to ask for help. His pickup was in the drive. Her sedan parked crooked, like she'd carried 3 bags of groceries and forgot to fix the angle. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warm squares of light pulsed behind the curtains. Norman Rockwell would have set up his easel right there. I pulled in behind Wilbur's truck. The engine ticked as it cooled. For one clean second, I let the scene be what it looked like. My daughter in a green dress, laughing. Amos stealing olives from a relish tray. A new start, the kind Martha used to pray over our meals. Bless this food and the ways we hurt each other less tomorrow. Then I saw him. A kid on the steps, hunched so small he looked 12, not 18. Arms wrapped around bony knees, breath smoky and thin, no coat, no hat. Just a long-sleeve shirt, dark with melted snow. Jeans, stiff with ice. The cold had painted his lips a frightening shade of blue. His shoulders shook the way a car shakes an idle, a brutal, involuntary tremor. Jesus, I heard myself say, door already open, coffee sloshing onto the snow. The wind bit my face hard enough to sting. I took the steps 2 at a time and knelt. Amos. He looked up and something broke in my chest. Relief and terror and shame all at once, wide in his eyes. Grandpa, he said, but the words stumbled through chattering teeth, vowels clipped by cold. My coat was on him before he finished. It swallowed him, the way it used to swallow me when Martha made me bundle up for January football games. His skin under my hands felt like metal left out overnight. I tried to rub warmth back into his fingers and he winced. What? I stopped, because rage had already climbed into my throat and it wasn't going to help him breathe. How long have you been out here? He startled at the volume and I pulled it back, made my voice quiet, the way you talk to animals with a leg in a trap. Son, look at me. How long? He glanced at the door, at the bright golden window glow as if it could scald. I'm not allowed to go in, he whispered, words puffing white. I'm supposed to think about what I did. What you did? The heat slammed back into my voice and he flinched again. Instinctive, practiced. I swallowed hard and tried again. Tell me. His gaze dropped to his hands. Frost-numbed fingers pinched the coat closed at his throat. I burned the turkey. Just the top. I forgot the timer. He swallowed. Adam's apple bobbing. Wilbur said I ruined Thanksgiving. He said I needed to learn responsibility. I looked through the sidelight at the dining room. Candles, china, crystal. A picture-perfect table laid bare, and my grandson outside like a dog. What time? I asked. He curled deeper into the coat. Around 11? I did the math. 3.5 hours at least, maybe more. The breath left me in a flat, ugly sound. Okay, I said, like we were just solving a normal problem. Okay, we're going to the truck. Now, he shook his head once, tiny. Please don't. Don't make it worse. There are sentences that lodge in your ribs and stay there forever. Don't make it worse. I taught this boy to skip stones and change oil. I'd watched him stand on a dock, those skinny legs trembling with excitement when a fish hit the line. I'd promised him, without saying the words, that adults are nets. They catch what falls. Come on, I said, gentler than I felt. I got him up, and he swayed. I slung my arm around him, felt how little weight there was to set against the wind, and got him into the passenger seat, cranked the heat like I was trying to warm a whole winter. I dug in the emergency bin for the blanket Martha insisted we keep, shook it out, wrapped him. His jaw tremors slowed to shivers, then to small ticks under the skin. Drink, I said, unscrewing the thermos cap and holding it so he didn't have to grip. He took 2 careful sips and blinked hard like the heat hurt. Inside the house, a cheer rose, muffled through glass, a touchdown, a joke, who knows. In the cab, only our breathing and the fan thrumming, the smell of coffee and wet wool. Amos, I said, and the name felt like prayer. I need you to tell me if this was the first time. His eyes flicked to me, then away. He drew the blanket tighter, chin sinking into the collar of my coat. Grandpa, he said softly, and I heard apology where there should never have been any. Please don't be mad. Mad at who? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The bruise last summer, the phone calls, the way he minimized himself in rooms where Wilbur expanded to fill the space. How many clues had I filed under Boys Will Be Boys? How many nights had Martha said, call him, check in, and I'd said, tomorrow? I looked at the front door. It was a glossy painted thing with a brass handle that caught the porch light just so. The kind of door that says, this house is fine, this family's fine. This is a place you would want to step inside. I put the truck in park, killed the engine, and felt everything in me settle into a single simple thought. If Martha were here, she'd squeeze my hand and say it out loud for both of us. Go get him. I'm going in, I said. He grabbed my sleeve, panic flashing. Don't, please, I know what he'll do, I said, surprising myself with the calm in it. And I know what I'm going to do. I took his chilled hand and squeezed. You stay in the truck. Keep the heat on. I'll be right back. Snow had piled up on the steps where he'd been sitting, neatly filling the dips his body left like the night was trying to erase him. I left boot prints over them, big and unambiguous, the kind that say someone showed up. The porch light burned steady. Behind the door, a song about gratitude floated thin and cheerful, as if it could wash the truth out of bones. I tested the handle. Locked. I stepped back once, braced, and let the weight of 6 decades and every factory shift and every mistake find a single point just beside the latch. The door gave with a crack like ice breaking on a river. The warm air hit my face, and with it, the smell of turkey and cinnamon and every lie a pretty table can tell. Happy Thanksgiving, I said to the silence that fell behind the music, and I walked in. The silence after the door gave way was deafening. No one spoke, no one moved. The warmth of the house clung to me like an accusation candlelight flickering, the buttery smell of turkey filling every corner, a television humming somewhere with the cheer of a holiday game. For a second, I thought I'd stepped into the wrong house, some postcard-perfect scene that couldn't possibly belong to the family that had left my grandson out there to freeze. But then I saw their faces. Wilbur was at the head of the table, carving knife poised midair, the muscles in his forearm taut as he froze at the sight of me. His shirt was crisp, his glass full of wine, his expression calm until his eyes landed on the boy half hidden behind me in my coat. His mouth tightened. Leona sat rigid, hair done up, pearls at her throat. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by years of living under that man's shadow. Across from her, a girl Wilbur's daughter from his first marriage stared wide-eyed, a fork of mashed potatoes hovering halfway to her mouth. And Amos, still wrapped in my coat, trembling from the cold that had worked itself deep into his bones. Have you lost your damn mind? Wilbur's voice cut through the room, low, controlled, dangerous. The voice of a man who wasn't used to being challenged. This is my house. I stepped forward. The floor groaned under my boots, snow melting off me into little dark puddles. Your house? You mean the one where you left my grandson sitting outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours? That house? Wilbur's jaw clenched. He needed to learn responsibility. Responsibility. The word landed in my gut like a punch. By freezing him half to death, I said. Over a burnt turkey? Leona flinched like the turkey was her shield. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes darted between us, a trapped animal in her own home. Amos pressed closer to me, his lips still tinged blue, and whispered so only I could hear, please don't make it worse. And that's when I felt the rage truly settle. Not as fire, but as ice sharp, focused. I looked at Wilbur, at the neat little kingdom he thought he ruled, and realized this wasn't about a turkey or a ruined holiday. It was about power. About breaking someone small enough to believe they deserved it. I leaned forward, my voice low enough to shake the glassware. You don't discipline children by leaving them to die on your porch. You abuse them. And it stops tonight. The little girl dropped her fork. The clatter was loud in the stillness. Wilbur set down the knife with deliberate slowness, eyes locked on mine. Get out. Now. Before I make you, I didn't move. Amos, go pack your things, I said, never breaking eye contact with the man across from me. You're coming home with me. The words landed like a grenade. Leona gasped. Dad, no, you can't. Wilbur's laugh was cold, humorless. Kidnapping, that's what this is. You think you can just barge in here and take him? Not kidnapping, I said. Rescue. For the first time that night, Wilbur's mask slipped. Just a flicker, a crack around the edges, but enough to know he understood. Someone was finally calling this what it was. Behind me, Amos shifted. He stood straighter, though the coat still hung heavy around him. For the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like hope. The cab of my Chevy had never felt smaller. Heat blasted from the vents, fogging the windshield where our breath collided with the warmth. Amos sat bundled in my coat and the emergency blanket, but his shivering hadn't stopped. It wasn't just the cold. It was the kind of tremor that comes from fear settling into the marrow, shaking him long after the storm outside lost its grip. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, knuckles tight enough to ache. Tell me the truth, son. How long has it been like this? His eyes flicked toward the house we'd left behind. Every light inside glowed warm, golden. The laughter and clinking silverware faint but audible, as though the family portrait behind those walls hadn't cracked. He pressed his lips together, the way kids do when silence feels safer than honesty. Amos, I said, softer this time. You're with me now. Nothing you say leaves this truck. Nothing you say makes me think less of you. But I need to know. He let out a sound somewhere between a sigh and a sob. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. It's always been like this. Since Mom married him, the words hit like sleet against glass, sharp and merciless. He stared at his hands, fingers twitching under the blanket. At first, it was little things. I had to redo chores if they weren't perfect. Couldn't sit down until he was finished eating. Couldn't talk unless someone asked me a question. He swallowed hard. Then it got worse. The garage, the basement, locked doors. He says it's discipline, that I need to toughen up. Mom, she just says it's his way. That I exaggerate, I felt the steering wheel grow slick under my palms. Martha's voice echoed in my memory, sharp and clear. Pay attention to that boy. He needs you. I thought about the bruise I'd seen last summer on his arm, shaped too neatly, like fingers to be from a fall. I'd asked. He'd said bike accident. I'd wanted to believe him, because believing otherwise meant admitting I'd failed him. How many times? I asked, forcing my voice calm. He shrugged under the blanket. The gesture was too old for 18. Last month, he locked me in the garage all night because I forgot to take out the trash. 2 weeks ago, he made me stand outside in the rain. Said I'd remember next time not to track mud on the carpet. His jaw trembled. Sometimes he doesn't even need a reason. Just, if he's in a mood, I stared through the windshield at the snow swirling in the headlights, my chest tight. And your mother? She tells me not to make it worse. The words came out flat, rehearsed, like a line he'd memorized for survival. She says Wilbur just wants me to be better. That I should try harder, be more responsible. She doesn't see. He stopped, breath hitching. Or maybe she does and just pretends. The self-blame in his tone carved through me. He sounded like someone convinced he'd built his own cage. Listen to me, I said, turning to face him fully, my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then stilled when he realized I wasn't grabbing, just holding. This isn't your fault. None of it. You hear me? This isn't discipline. It's abuse, plain and simple. And it ends tonight. His eyes filled, wide and disbelieving. Grandpa, if you make a scene, he'll hurt me worse. He always does. I shook my head. No, not this time. Because I'm here now. And I should have been here sooner. That truth burned. Every missed call. Every excuse I let myself accept. Every time I laughed off his quiet pleas as teenage drama. Martha would have known better. She would have heard the cracks in his voice. I tightened my grip on his shoulder. Steady. You are not alone anymore. Do you understand? I don't care what it takes. I'm not leaving you here. The silence stretched. Then slowly, he nodded. Just once. But it was enough. In the distance, the house glowed warm. A picture-perfect Thanksgiving. But in my truck sat the truth. A boy who had learned to fold himself into silence, and a grandfather who had finally decided silence wasn't an option. Buckle up, I said, turning the key. The engine rumbled back to life. This storm's not just outside, Amos. But I promise you, we're driving straight through it. The Chevy's heater still roared, but I killed the engine. The silence that followed was sharp, like the world itself was waiting to see if I'd back down. Amos shifted under the blanket, eyes wide, breath shallow. Stay here, I said, hand already on the door handle. Grandpa, please? His voice cracked. If you go back in, I know exactly what he'll do. I cut in, steady but cold. And I know exactly what I'm going to do. I stepped out into the snow. Each crunch of my boots on the frozen ground carried more weight than I'd felt in years. My breath came in thick clouds, anger and winter indistinguishable. By the time I reached the porch, I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was a man who'd watched his grandson suffer, while he'd convinced himself everything was fine. The guilt burned hotter than the storm ever could. The front door hung crooked where I'd forced it open earlier. Wood splintered at the lock. I shoved it wide, and the warmth slapped me again, thick with roasted turkey, cinnamon, and lies. Inside the dining room glowed. Candles flickered on a perfect white tablecloth. Wine glasses sparkled. The turkey sat carved, steaming, beautiful. A picture out of a magazine, except for the faces. Wilbur rose from the head of the table, broad shoulders squared, jaw set. The carving knife was still in his hand, gleaming under the chandelier. Leona sat stiff, her hand froze in midair as if she'd been about to serve potatoes. Her eyes darted to me, then away. Across the table, the little girl whimpered, fork clattering onto china. "Have you completely lost it?" Wilbur's voice was a growl, low and dangerous. "You barge into my house, break my door, and now what? You want to ruin Thanksgiving too?" "Ruin Thanksgiving?" My laugh came out sharp, bitter. "You already did that when you locked my grandson outside to freeze." Leona flinched, her lips parted, but no words came. Wilbur set the knife down with exaggerated calm, like a man who believed he was still in control. He rounded the table, each step deliberate, claiming the room with sheer presence. "He's 18. Not a child." He burned the turkey, embarrassed his mother in front of our guests. Actions have consequences. I stepped further in, boots dripping onto their polished floor. Consequences. That boy's lips were turning blue. His hands were so cold he couldn't grip a mug. "You call that teaching? I call it abuse." Wilbur's eyes narrowed. "Careful. Careful is what you should have been," I shot back. "Careful when you decided a burnt bird was worth risking a life. Careful when you thought fear was the same thing as discipline." The girl across the table started crying harder. Leona reached out to hush her, but her own hands were trembling. Wilbur's voice rose, sharp. "You don't get to tell me how to raise my household. Not you, not anyone. This isn't raising a household," I said, my voice steady enough to cut glass. "It's breaking one, and it stops tonight." He stepped closer, so close I could smell the wine on his breath. His size loomed over me, 50 pounds heavier, 20 years younger. He thought that mattered. "Get out," he said, low and final, "or I'll make you." Behind me, I heard Amos's footsteps. He'd come in, still wrapped in my coat, blanket dragging at his heels. His voice was small but clear. "I'm leaving with Grandpa." The room froze. Leona gasped, a sound caught between fear and heartbreak. "Amos," but Wilbur turned, eyes narrowing at the boy like a predator cornering prey. "The hell you are." That was it, the line drawn. My voice dropped to steel. "Pack your things, Amos. Now, you're done here." The house felt like it was holding its breath as Amos slipped past Wilbur and started up the stairs. Every creak of the steps was a drumbeat in my chest. I stayed rooted in the entryway, body angled between Wilbur and the boy, ready to block, ready to fight if I had to. Wilbur's voice followed Amos up, a hiss more than words. "Don't you dare pack a damn thing. You walk out that door, boy. You don't come back." Amos's reply floated down, small but steady. "Fine by me." The words cracked something in the room. Even Leona's spoon slipped from her hand and clattered against porcelain. Her eyes went wide, her lips parting like she couldn't believe her son had just said that out loud. I followed Amos up the stairs, leaving Wilbur seething at the bottom. The hallway was narrow, dim, lined with family photos where Amos's face never appeared. His door was the last one on the left. When I stepped inside, my chest tightened. The room was barely more than a storage closet. A twin bed shoved into the corner with no headboard, a single dresser with peeling veneer, and a bare bulb overhead. No posters, no warmth, just cold, empty walls. "This is where you sleep?" I asked, my voice low. Amos didn't answer. He was already stuffing clothes into a beat-up duffel bag, movements fast and mechanical, like a soldier executing orders. A Dayton University sweatshirt went in, then a stack of t-shirts, a pair of worn jeans. He grabbed a battered notebook from the nightstand and shoved it deep into the bag, like it was the most precious thing he owned. Wilbur's shadow filled the doorway. "Put that bag down." His voice was sharp, dangerous. "You're not going anywhere." I stepped between them, squaring my shoulders. "He's leaving. You so much as take one more step toward him, you'll wish you hadn't." For a long second, no one moved. Wilbur's jaw worked, his fists clenching and unclenching. But he didn't cross the threshold, not with me standing there. Leona appeared behind him, wringing her hands, eyes darting between her husband and her son. "Amos," she whispered, "please, don't do this. This is your home." Amos zipped the duffel shut with a harsh sound that cut through the tension. He turned, eyes wet but burning, and faced his mother. His voice broke, but the words carried more weight than anything I'd ever heard him say. "If you love me, Mom," he said, "you wouldn't let this happen." Leona's breath hitched. Her knees buckled slightly against the door frame. She had no answer. Amos pushed past us, duffel over his shoulder. His footsteps were quick, certain, down the stairs. I followed close behind, keeping Wilbur's glare in my periphery. The front door still hung splintered from when I'd kicked it in. Cold air rushed in, scattering napkins across the table, making the candles gutter. The whole picture-perfect Thanksgiving scene looked flimsy now. A stage set collapsing under the weight of truth. Wilbur barked after us, voice echoing against the walls. "You leave this house, boy. You're nothing to me." Nothing. Amos didn't even look back. "I've been nothing to you for 3 years." He stepped out into the snow, duffel slung across his shoulder, my coat still drowning his frame. I followed, and together we walked to the truck without another word. The door slammed shut behind us like the period at the end of a long, ugly sentence. The slam of that broken door echoed through the night air, but inside the house, it detonated like a bomb. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Forks abandoned, chairs scraping, the hum of the television suddenly obscene against the ruin of their perfect holiday tableau. Leona stood in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was pale, lips trembling, eyes darting between me, Amos, and the man she'd chosen. She looked like a woman finally realizing the ground beneath her wasn't solid, but quicksand. "Amos," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't go. Please, we can fix this." Amos stopped halfway down the walkway, snow swirling around him, duffel bag heavy on his shoulder. He turned, face shadowed by the porch light. "Fix this?" His laugh was hollow, sharp. "You've had 3 years to fix it." "You never even tried?" Wilbur pushed past her, red-faced and furious, his voice booming into the night. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can defy me and there won't be consequences?" I stepped closer to Amos, putting myself between them, my stance wide and steady. "Consequences," I repeated, my voice low but cutting. "That's all you know, isn't it? Threats and punishment. Not tonight. Not ever again." Wilbur jabbed a finger toward me, his whole body shaking with rage. "This is kidnapping. You're stealing my stepson. I'll call the police. I'll have you arrested before you even leave the block." I almost smiled, though nothing about this was funny. "Go ahead, call them. And when they arrive, you can explain why that boy was blue-lipped and half dead from the cold. You can explain the garage, the basement, the locked doors. You think I won't tell them? Try me." His mouth opened, then snapped shut. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. Leona's knees finally gave out. She sank onto the entryway step, hands clutching her skirt, sobs breaking loose from somewhere deep and raw. "I should have stopped it," she whispered, words meant for herself but spilling into the night. "God help me, I should have stopped it." Amos's breath fogged the air. He looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the painful acknowledgement that maybe she was trapped too. Still, his voice was steady when he said, "If you couldn't protect me then, Mom, let me protect myself now." The snow fell heavier, muffling the world around us, but Wilbur's fury cut through the storm. "You walk away tonight, Amos. You're no son of mine." Amos pulled my coat tighter around his shoulders. His lips were cracked, but his words carried clear and strong. "Good, because I never wanted to be." The silence that followed was colder than the wind, and for once, Wilbur had no answer. I opened the truck door, guiding Amos inside, and turned back just once. Leona was still on the step, sobbing into her hands. Wilbur stood rigid behind her, fists clenched, eyes burning holes through me. But neither of them moved. Neither of them stopped us. The engine roared to life. Snowflakes streaked across the windshield like sparks. I put the truck in gear and pulled away from the house, from the prison that had masqueraded as a home. Beside me, Amos exhaled, shaky but certain. "Grandpa, am I really free?" I tightened my grip on the wheel, eyes on the storm ahead. "You'll never spend another night under that roof. That's a promise." The drive away from that house felt like crossing an invisible border. Behind us, the glow of the porch light shrank into the storm until it vanished completely, swallowed by snow and distance. For the first time in years, Amos didn't glance nervously over his shoulder. He just stared out the passenger window, eyes glassy, clutching the blanket like it was the only thing tethering him to this new reality. My own hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. Every mile between us and Wilbur felt like breathing room. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Abusers don't just let go. They chase. They manipulate. They call in favors. Still, I kept my voice calm when I said, "Almost home, son." Just a few more minutes, Amos nodded, but he didn't speak. His silence wasn't empty, though. It was heavy, packed with 3 years of words no one had listened to. When we finally turned into my driveway, the porch light glowed steady, a soft beacon in the storm. Amos hesitated when I opened the truck door for him, his body rigid like he expected someone to yank him back inside at the last second. I placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You're safe here. Come on inside." Warmth enveloped us. The familiar smell of coffee grounds, the faint lavender of Martha's sachets in the hall closet. Home. I hung my coat by the door, but Amos kept mine wrapped tight around him, sinking into it like a shield. "Hungry?" I asked, heading toward the kitchen. He hesitated before answering. "Kinda." I pulled a bag of chicken from the freezer, started thawing it in the microwave, then dug around for vegetables. Amos hovered near the doorway, eyes darting over the modest furniture. The old photos on the walls, the quilt folded neatly on the couch. He looked like a stray animal trying to decide if it was safe to sit. "You don't have to just stand there," I said gently. "This is your home now. Sit where you like." Slowly, he lowered himself into a chair at the kitchen table. His hands rested on the wood, fingers splayed, as if testing whether it would be pulled away. We cooked together, me seasoning the chicken, him rinsing carrots under the tap. It was awkward at first, but the rhythm came back, faint echoes of summers past when he'd helped Martha shell peas on this very counter. By the time we sat down to eat, the tension in his shoulders had eased, if only a little. Halfway through his plate, he paused. "Grandpa?" "Yeah?" His eyes dropped to the food. What if he calls the cops? Says you kidnapped me?" I set my fork down. "Then I'll tell them the truth. That I found my grandson freezing on a porch while his stepfather carved turkey. That I wasn't about to leave him there to die. And you'll tell them too. Understand?" He gave a small nod, chewing slowly. But I could see the fear still flickering in his eyes. the years of conditioning that told him safety was temporary. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I built a fire, the crackle filling the quiet. Amos curled into the armchair, blanket still around him. For the first time that night, the shivering stopped. He stared into the flames. I made Dean's list last semester, he said suddenly, voice tentative, like he wasn't sure if sharing good news was allowed. I turned, surprised. You did? He nodded, a shy spark lighting his expression. Mechanical engineering? Like you? I didn't think I'd make it, but I did. Pride swelled in my chest, sharp and fierce. Martha would have been over the moon. Silence settled again, softer this time. Healing silence. Then 3 sharp knocks at the door. Amos flinched so hard the blanket slipped from his shoulders. His breath hitched, panic rising. I stood, heart pounding, and glanced through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. Behind them, just out of the glow of the porch light, Wilbur's hulking frame loomed. Leona was beside him, her face pale, unreadable. Grandpa, Amos whispered, voice shaking. He found us. I took a slow breath, steadying myself before I opened the door. The pounding on the door echoed through the house like a warning shot. Amos shrank deeper into the armchair, pulling the blanket up to his chin, eyes wide with panic. I steadied my breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. 2 officers stood on my porch, snow clinging to their boots, radios crackling faintly on their shoulders. Between them loomed Wilbur, his face twisted with righteous fury and Leona's small, pale, eyes darting like a trapped bird. Mr. Burke, the older officer said, voice clipped but tired. We've had a report of possible kidnapping. We need to ask some questions. Wilbur surged forward, pointing a thick finger past me. There. That's him. That old man broke into my house, smashed my door, and dragged my stepson away against his will. Arrest him! I didn't move from the doorway. My grandson is inside, warm and safe for the first time all day. If you want to hear the truth, ask him yourself. The second officer's gaze flicked past me toward the flickering firelight. Is Amos Green here? I turned slightly. Amos, son, come here. He froze. I could see the battle on his face, fear of Wilbur's wrath versus the desperate need to finally be heard. Slowly, with trembling legs, he stood and stepped into the entryway, blankets still around his shoulders. His lips were pale, his hands shaking, but his voice, when it came, was clear. I want to stay with my grandpa. Wilbur let out a bitter laugh. You see? He's been poisoned against me, filled his head with lies. The boy doesn't know what's good for him. The officer raised a hand, silencing him. Amos, are you here voluntarily? Yes, sir. His voice cracked, but he held steady. He didn't kidnap me. He saved me. Saved you from what? Amos's eyes flicked to Wilbur, then to his mother. She wouldn't meet his gaze. He took a breath. From freezing to death. He made me sit outside for 4 hours, in 5-degree weather, because I burnt the turkey. The younger officer scribbled in his notebook, jaw tightening.
The older one frowned. Sir, he said to Wilbur, is this true? Wilbur scoffed, arms crossed. It was discipline. He needed to learn responsibility. Teenagers exaggerate everything. Then, from behind him, a voice cracked the night. Leona's.
No, she whispered, barely audible over the crunch of snow. He's not exaggerating. Everyone turned. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of her coat. Tears brimmed in her eyes. He's telling the truth. Wilbur locked him out. He told me not to open the door, no matter what. Wilbur spun toward her, eyes blazing. What the hell are you doing? But Leona's voice grew stronger, as though years of silence were breaking in a single moment. I'm telling the truth. For once. He's been hurting Amos for years. The garage, the basement, controlling everything he does. I let it happen. Her voice cracked. And I can't anymore. The air seemed to split open. The officers glanced at each other, then at me, then back at Wilbur. Sir, the older officer said, stepping forward, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for child endangerment. Wilbur's face turned crimson. He took a step back, fist clenched. You can't do this. He's 18. He's my responsibility. Not anymore, I said, voice cold. You lost that right the second you left him outside to die. The cuffs clicked shut, metal against bone. Wilbur roared, words spilling like venom, but the storm swallowed them as the officers led him toward the patrol car. Leona stood frozen on the porch, tears streaking her cheeks. Amos looked at her, eyes searching, hoping for something she couldn't give. Finally, he whispered, If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have let this happen. Her sobs broke loose, shoulders collapsing inward. But Amos turned away, stepping back inside with me, the warmth of the fire closing around us. For the first time, the night felt survivable. The patrol car's red and blue lights cut through the snow, casting broken colors across the living room walls. Amos sat curled on the couch, blankets still around his shoulders, staring at the glow through the window, as if he couldn't believe Wilbur was really gone. I sat beside him, one hand resting lightly on his back. He didn't flinch this time. That alone told me something had shifted. The knock on the door that followed was gentler, one of the officers returning. Mr. Burke, he said, voice calmer now. We'll need formal statements tonight, both yours and Amos's. Standard procedure. I nodded, glancing at my grandson. His jaw tightened, but after a beat, he whispered, I'll do it. At the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Too bright, too sharp. Amos sat across from a detective with a legal pad, his hands clenched tight in his lap. For the first few minutes, his voice shook, halting, every word a fight against the years of silence drilled into him. But once he realized no one was going to shut him down, he couldn't stop. He told them about the garage nights, about the basement, locked from the outside, about meals withheld, showers timed, words policed. He told them about the turkey, the 4 hours in the cold, and the way his mother had looked away each time Wilbur's punishments grew harsher. By the time he finished, the detective's pen had stopped moving. The man's face was pale, jaw set tight. "That's enough for now," he said gently. "You've done the hard part, son. You're safe here." In another room, I glimpsed Leona through the glass. She sat hunched in a chair, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She wasn't handcuffed, just broken, torn between guilt and shame. I wanted to hate her, but when I saw her shoulders shake, I knew the truth. She had been a prisoner too, just of a different kind. Reporters were already circling outside by the time we left. Neighbors whispering, flashes of cameras, the words abuse and stepfather already swirling like poison in the winter air. I pulled Amos close, shielding him from the chaos. "Ignore them," I said. "All that matters is you're out." Back home, the fire had burned down to embers. Amos sank into the armchair again, exhausted. For the first time since I'd found him on those frozen steps, his breathing evened out, his body finally surrendering to sleep. I watched him, every rise and fall of his chest a small victory, and in that quiet I realized something. The battle with Wilbur was ending, but the real war healing, rebuilding, giving Amos a life free of fear was just beginning. Court moved faster than I expected. Maybe because the evidence was so stark, medical reports, police testimony, Leona's own words finally spoken under oath. Wilbur sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, trying to look like a wronged man instead of the tyrant who had ruled his household. But the bruises on Amos's arms, the testimony about nights locked in the garage, the frozen lips the officer saw that night, those told the story more clearly than any lawyer ever could. Leona's turn on the stand was the hardest. Her voice broke as she admitted how many times she'd turned away, how many nights she'd heard her son shivering on the other side of a locked door and done nothing. "I told myself it was discipline," she whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. "But the truth is, I was too afraid to stand up to him." The judge's gavel came down harder than expected. Child endangerment, unlawful restraint, reckless abuse. Sentencing to follow, but Wilbur's fate was sealed. The man who thought he owned Amos's future had lost his own. Afterward, Amos stood outside the courthouse steps, blinking against the winter sun. Reporters swarmed, but he held his head high, my coat still draped over his shoulders like armor. "I'm not his victim anymore," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Back home, life began to shift. Amos started talking about college again, not with the hesitation of someone asking permission, but with the certainty of someone planning his own life. "Engineering," he told me one night by the fire. "Like you. But maybe someday, I'll teach, or work with kids like me, so they know they're not alone." I felt something in my chest crack open, pride, relief, sorrow for the years lost. Martha would have been proud. God, she would have been so proud. Leona moved in for a while, trying to rebuild what she'd broken. Amos was polite but distant, speaking to her in clipped words, careful glances. Healing between them would take time if it ever came at all. But at least the silence had been shattered. At least the truth was out. Some nights, I lay awake, listening to Amos's even breathing from the next room, the quiet hum of safety filling the house. I thought about the door I'd kicked in, the 4 hours that could have ended his life, the single choice that changed everything. Ask yourself, what would you have done if it was your grandson, your son? Would you have walked away to keep the peace or shattered the facade to save a life? The scars will never leave him. They'll never leave me either. But scars are proof of survival, not surrender. And in this house, in the glow of the fire, in the warmth of family rebuilt, we had reclaimed something Wilbur could never touch, the right to live without fear. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. Sometimes the truth is heavier than the feast itself.